But in the way of this, what is wisdom question? I know you and I have done, obviously tons of podcast episodes and conversations, but I thought a good place to start might be the definition that shows up for the Stoics in Diogenes of Laertes. This idea of knowing what is good, being virtue, knowing what is bad, vice, and then knowing what is indifferent. I have lots of respect for that succinct, clear definition in a way. And I don't know, I was thinking, obviously, the last time we connected, we talked about how to live, and it's many things, and what is wisdom is many things. And even with that definition, sometimes I think when I try to put this into practice in daily life, it's still a bit more challenging than, it initially comes off. But I do think that's such a good starting point, knowing what is good, knowing what is bad, and knowing what is indifferent.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's a really interesting idea that I think it lends itself to the often kind of cited by the Stoics, this idea that the wise man or woman, desires the same things and avoids the same things. It's almost like there's this point that they get to, when you know what is good, what is bad, what is indifferent, what is virtue, what is vice. There's like okay, now I can rest because I know, you know what I mean? Like the chaos of life is almost put at bay because you know what it is that you'll accept and what you won't, and and what really doesn't make a difference. I just wonder how, like, in even that in itself, and perhaps we get glimpses of this at times. It seems like a kind of equanimity amid the real, genuine suffering and chaos of our thoughts and life in general. Do you know what I mean? Like, ultimately, philosophy is about kind of like psychological repair, right? Or spiritual repair, like trying to get us to the point where we can see clearly, feel clearly, know clearly, and to the extent, I guess, to the Stoics, like it's to the extent that you know what is right, what is wrong, and what doesn't make a difference, that's what's going to bring that level of kind of clarity to your life and your decision making process. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, the makes me think as you're talking. I wonder if we all have different degrees of, I want to say, belief in this. Like, say, just take one piece of it, knowing what is indifferent. Like, depending on what the situation is or what the issue is, it's like as you speak of that consistency thing, which I love how Seneca talks about in a couple different letters on, it's this obviously consistency thing. It's every time, where I'm not necessarily consistent. There are times when I, know what is indifferent with some clarity. And then there are other times, there's things that essentially I know are in this category of an indifferent, but my actions aren't lining up, with that. And like even the knowing what is good, like it's just about virtue for the Stoics anyway. You know, this focus, like virtue is the only good. I think the with many things in life, at least something I think about is in the way of our belief or our, you know, how deeply do I believe in that? And I think in some ways that connects with the consistency thing. It's like as we're cultivating something, and then like Seneca talking about that, like I'm assuming he's talking about someone that is far down the path that is, you know, been at this thing for many decades. But I don't know, how do you think about this idea of, well, how deeply do you actually believe that?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, well, you're talking to a tormented soul here. I mean, I get it. It's like, yeah, seriously, man. I mean, like, yeah, every day it's like we're faced with this deluge of problems to solve and questions to answer. And, the more and more responsibility you take in your life for, for your own actions and for the lives of others, and you know, you can imagine. Well, I mean, you don't have to imagine, but I don't have kids yet, but you've got kids, and it's like, um, not only do you probably wrestle with this idea, well, hang on, is my kid really an indifferent, like, or like, is it true what they say that we should kind of like let, if a child dies, you let them go back to the universe from whence they came to, you were always just borrowing the, it's it's so difficult to believe in something like that, and then you have to contend with, well, I can never tell my wife that. Like, I can never air these kinds of thoughts about, well, we've got to act like they're going to die every night. Anyway, I'm rambling right now, but there's so much that we have to think about, that I think you're right. It's like only the sage has gotten to that point. And I think that people do come along every so often who truly believe these things to such a degree that they do not desire, and they find peace. They find that kind of that space that the Stoics were looking for, where they move toward the same things, they avoid the same things, you know. But I think belief is perhaps the right way of looking at it. And actually, I wonder if I can share a couple of quotes here, because I was also interested in, the tradition of like how you get to wisdom, right? And that's why I think the belief is an appropriate term, because there's a couple of quotes here. There's a passage from James in the Bible, which was, not in any sort of bad way, but it was drilled into me as a kid, growing up in church. There's this passage that I vividly remember learning about. And then there's a passage from Heraclitus that I want to read, and both of them have very kind of complementary. Uh, they complement each other in terms of giving us a way to receive wisdom. So Heraclitus said, "Applicants for wisdom, do what I have done, inquire within." You know, and then we read in James in the Bible, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith," perhaps the belief element coming in, "with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind." And I actually don't think that that was the King James version, which I much, much prefer. But nonetheless, uh, for me, both of these passages saying a similar kind of thing. It's like, give yourself space for deep meditation or prayer or inner inquiry, quiet the mind and really, like, fully, with every part of yourself, ask, what is wisdom, in this particular situation? Uh, and I've come across, people who that's their daily practice, is to open up that space in their day where they can look to the day ahead and really just go, no external stimulus other than perhaps maybe they're reading the Bible a little bit, or they're getting some sort of, doing a meditation, but ultimately it's aimed towards uh, carving out a space in your day to cultivate wisdom for your life. And uh, I think that's a really strange thing, right? Like, isn't that it seems to me to be like a real, like, you don't see any other, like, creatures of the earth but carving out a space in their day to cultivate, better decision making processes, or how can I have greater, the concept isn't even there. But for us, we have this ability to, like, quiet the mind and allow messages to become part of us through this process of, like, opening up space, allow it to come in, and then we act on it throughout our day. And I just think, yeah, especially in today's culture where it's all about noise, there's clutter, there's so much to do, people are struggling, do we even have the time, the space in our day to be able to carve out that time to pursue wisdom? I think busyness and just the constant rush of life is almost the enemy of wisdom, because it doesn't give us the space to actually pause and say, hang on, like, what's a better way? Anyway, I'm going off on a big halftime speech here, I feel, but what do you
No,
think of that?
I love it. Um, what it is interesting. Like I think we touched on it last time we connected, in the way of how to live. We kind of know generally. I mean, we
Hmm.
have some inner wisdom to maybe know, but there's just a lot of things that get in the way. And
Yeah.
I wonder if that, connects here, like in the way of like maybe we have more wisdom than we realize.
Hmm.
I sometimes think of like, say, self improvement, or self help, or whatever it may be. Someone over a few years, reads a stack of books, like you do, and I do, and many of the listeners do as well. But is there any sort of self improvement really? I mean, is that really self improvement? Um, I mean, if you look at what the Stoics are talking about, knowing what is good, what's bad, knowing what's indifferent. I mean, essentially, it's not that much different than what they're teaching on Sesame Street. I mean,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
what,
yeah,
or what Mister Rogers, was talking about when I was a kid. It's not
yeah.
a huge thing. Or if you think of like the Golden Rule or something like that, generally we know when I recently went on vacation, I brought C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity with
Mm,
me, and didn't get all the way through it, but he talks about this law of I don't know if he exactly calls it a law of human nature, but essentially we all generally know what is good. That feels true to me, that we generally know, because like I have kids, like you say, that are younger, and kids generally know when something is not fair, or when someone was unkind. They know it at a very young age. I mean, it's almost like hardwired in them in a way that we're supposed to be kind and work in some sort of harmony. Now, of course, they're also, delivering some of that, unkind and selfish type of stuff as well at times. But the fact that we can identify it and it kind of ruffles our feathers, I don't know, makes it think like,
mm,
think that we know. And if to go on a ramble here and bring like Seneca back in, that question of progress towards wisdom. Yeah, I think I have made some progress. I'm being a bit kinder to myself.
mm,
Is there anything like,
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what's so, it's not necessarily crazy complicated in one aspect of it,
Mm, mm.
but then it is at the same time in some ways.
Yeah, well, no, I think you're right. I think, to bring that idea of belief back into it. Well, firstly, you're reminding me of a Dan Carlin bit. Did you ever watch Dan Carlin much?
Yeah, yeah.
He has that great bit where he's going through all of the people who ought to be killed. He's like, he's talking about, here's another bunch of lowlifes who ought to be taken into the woods and buried 10 foot deep, you know. And he talks about these people who read self-help books. If you need self-help, why do you need a book? It's not self-help. I mean, it's like that's
Yeah.
somebody else helping, right? But you know, uh, to this idea of just the inherent wisdom that we all have, right? I think we've all come across a person who gives the best life advice, even though you know that their life is going terribly for them and everybody around them. It's like, you know, the person who gives you unsolicited advice, and you're like, "Hey, man, I know you, I know, you know." But nonetheless, we seem to be able to draw, from our life experience, wisdom. Everybody has it, everybody can tell you, about how to be better, how to be stronger and wiser and everything like that. But maybe back to your question of belief, I wonder if it's, you know, do we actually fully, with every part of ourselves, believe that to take the actions of that armchair advice that we give everybody else would actually lead to a better life? I've got a great example. I mean, like I went to Walmart this morning, had to get a couple of things before I came here to record this with you. I went in, and what do they have there right at the front? They've got my favorite thing in the world, which is their 74-cent fruit pies. It's like my favorite thing in the world. A pecan pie for like 74 cents, that's just a no-brainer, right? Like, what are we talking about? Give me 10 of them. And I could have given the wise advice if I had like a little kid there and he's like, "Hey, what food should I buy today?" I'd be like, "Go for the apple, go for the banana, get yourself like I don't know what." I could have told him that. But like Alan Watts says, I wanted the goodie, right? I was in a consciousness of childishness. Like and so I went for it, and I was eating that pie on my way here, and it's like not even 9 a.m. and here I am having this little fruit pie. You know, not the wisest of decisions. Um, but I wanted the goodie. In that moment, I clearly didn't believe that the wise choice was going to lead to greater satisfaction and happiness. I believed that choice was going to give me the happiness in that moment. And it did. and that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
because don't you think it's always going to be about like that balance? Because even making that decision, then you can, I don't know, you can justify it by, well, okay, it's not too bad. I feel pretty healthy and well, as long as it's not all the time. Maybe I can have one pie a day, you know, as long as I have an
Yeah.
apple too. But yeah, it's just, I think, yeah, it's just funny because I recognize that totally because I make a whole bunch of terrible decisions, and that just shows that I don't fully believe that the advice that I would give everybody else, in that moment would bring me greater satisfaction in life. And um, I think that's why there's always, like in philosophy, there's always like a wrestling constantly because, well, just one side note here that I think relates. You mentioned Diogenes, his exploration of the Stoic definition of wisdom. He has another definition that he gives uh, in the lives of the philosophers, um, and that other definition is a knowledge of things human and divine, right? And I think that's like a really profound thing to meditate on because the Stoics, they talk about how the soul should have dominion over the body. Uh, it's like the spirit that endows kind of inanimate matter with some sort of motion, and like the body is just, to me it seems like in that moment I was going with the desires of the body to get that pie. My soul was like, all right, buddy, let's go. Your chemistry is all turned on. You really want that, you want that sugar, you want that hit, right? But the body, the soul in that moment just didn't have the strength to say, no, wisdom, like let's do something different. And so I think that for the Stoics, and perhaps we all recognize this, like the philosophical path is just this like wrestling to get your decision making faculties to the point where they can comfortably make the better choice. Like it's almost like we're trying to increase our batting average, you know, uh, and sometimes our batting average is pretty terrible. Sometimes we build it up, but it's always going to be that wrestling, and that I think is why that statement you mentioned from Seneca is so wise. I've worked with like a lot of men in particular through my mentoring practice, and by far the most valuable thing that like the changes that I've seen in people have disproportionately come from that wisdom of like, hey man, Epictetus said, self-improvement has to be a balance of self criticism and self-kindness. And I think, especially for men, when we learn that, we're like, oh my gosh, wait, so I don't have to beat myself up constantly because every day I get a pecan pie from, from what,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying I do that every day. But the point remains, like, I think that in itself is such a balancing principle because it gives us the permission and the strength to keep on going on the philosophical path, despite the fact that in that constant wrestling, uh, perhaps between the world of the divine, where we make all the best decisions and we give the best advice, and the world of the body, or the human world that we exist in, which is chaotic at times and difficult, like it's so difficult to walk that philosophical path and that wrestling constantly. And so kindness, self-forgiveness, being a friend to yourself almost balances out the constant torment of why do I make these decisions and how can I make better decisions? Um, I'll throw it over to you because I've rambled. Yeah.
I want to I want to make an Epicurean case for the 74 cent pecan pie if I
Yes, please do.
could.
What did he say?
uh,
Give me a wheel of cheese and a garden, and I'm happy. Like for me, that's
yeah,
give me a 74-cent pie and a garden. I'm
yeah.
happy.
It's it's so funny to me. Like around the same time, these rival philosophical schools, virtue is the only good, like the bumper sticker, if you will, or on the sign. And then over here, the Epicureans, who Seneca's quoting a fair bit in many of the letters. Pleasure is the only good, but it's not so much how we maybe think about pleasure today. Maybe we think about it, different than
Mm,
they did a couple millennia ago. But the three, I made a note of the three inscriptions at the Temple of Apollo. This: know thyself, nothing to excess, and certainty brings insanity. But this thing of nothing to excess, or even like, in our mind, like this thing of you know critical of ourselves, being kind to ourselves. You think of music, like, I mean, you like art, or even sometimes, like, we might feel guilty for like watching Netflix or something like that, which is essentially our art. I mean, these are people that are,
mm,
I mean, maybe there's different levels of that, but I mean, there's beautiful things that you can watch on your TV. Like 2,000 years ago, people went and watched things like that live, in these plays. Um, and I'm sure that exists in some parts, but it's not necessarily in every town where you can do something like that. But of course, if it's not to excess, of course those are good. I've been watching some
mm,
of these cooking shows lately. I mean, these just unbelievably talented people, like some of the best chefs in the world that in 20 minutes can do just this amazing meal. That should be appreciated. Like that, I think there has to be some sort of wisdom in appreciating that. Maybe you can obviously and should remind yourself that I don't need this 74-cent whatever. I don't, need to stop by the art gallery or listen to music. You don't necessarily need to, but it seems like there's in this what is wisdom, that there is a lot of wisdom in really appreciating your life. Now I'm laughing because I'm thinking about
mm.
the poem you read last time we connected, Bukowski. He says you can open a can of sardines with style or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I mean, to me, it seems like, how do we appreciate some of these things? Not to excess, not to the point of where we feel like this is something we have to have, but to have a deep appreciation for some of these things has to be connected with wisdom, I think, and the art of living type of stuff.
Mm, mm. Well, firstly, I'm deeply uncomfortable with you equating a 74-cent pie from Walmart with going to an art gallery and listening to great music. Okay, that's out of balance, my friend.
Yeah.
No, but I think you're exactly right. Like that idea of uh, how the little pleasures that we get from the in balance pleasure, you know. Uh, I think back to Sunday dinners with my family back in Australia, and we'd always have this phenomenal cheese platter. Mum just loves putting together a cheese platter before dinner. Oh, it's a family favorite. And oh man, the way that she puts it together, it's virtue, right? It's like it looks great. There's a variety of cheeses, crackers. It's all. And I don't mean to be. There's a lot of problems in the world, and here we are talking about cheese platters. I hope there's a point to this. And that's like that to me, it's like beautiful. It's artistry. It's good cooking. It's good preparation. Everything, and it comes down to the table, and we're enjoying ourselves as a family, and you know, it brings us together, conversation, all this sort of stuff. It's so beautiful, and that is, you know, a kind of pleasure in balance. Nonetheless, what usually happens is, by the time we get to dinner, we've eaten so much cheese. It's just like, yeah, so that's a lack of virtue. That's a lack of balance, right? Because what would be
Yeah.
ideal is if, and some people in the family, like my wife Jen, you know, she's more in balance than others when it comes to food, and so she'll eat a little bit, you know, and it'll just be perfect, and dinner comes and it's all good. But you know, it's like these chain of events where, like, at any moment it could go off the rails with, you know, a lack of balance. Um, but yeah, even yeah, along the lines of like that kind of. I know we're not necessarily talking about virtue here. We're talking about wisdom. But I was at Disneyland the other day and walking around, and something finally kind of hit me there. I'm not usually a fan of theme parks and carnivals and all this sort of stuff, and it'll, yeah, it's not really my scene. But something did hit me there. I was like, oh, okay, I think I kind of get it, what Disney was going for with this place. Because if you had to think in your mind, like, what's the ideal society? Let's say you live in a town and you're trying to think of the ways that you want to improve your town. If I was walking through town, what would make it the happiest, most virtuous, beautiful place to be? You know, there would be live music on the corner. You know, every store would be architecturally beautiful, you know, and you'd want to walk in and everything's laid out perfectly and beautifully. And all these items that you're looking at are like high quality, you know, well built, you know, and you walk around and everybody's kind of, you know, the place is bustling and it's rich with laughter and joy, and, you know, people having a good time. And you know, maybe you go over here and you've got some more music, or you've got some drawing or whatever, you know. I just looked around and I was like, oh my gosh, he's trying to create like a little picture of utopia. You know, like, um, even though sometimes you get the complete opposite feeling, like, I want to get out of here. This is madness. but
Yeah.
but still, I think uh, wisdom should lead us towards virtue, right? And I think this kind of contemplation on how how can every layer or level of my life, every area of my life, be harmonious. Uh, you know, my family, I mean, my individual psychology, you know, my family, my community, my workplace, you know, how can all of these parts just work beautifully towards some kind of balance, harmony, uh, so that there's a sort of, I think that's what we're aiming at, you know, both within ourselves, you know, within ourselves and without of ourselves. It's the same thing. It's like that harmonious life and that balance of everything. And and to me, that kind of contemplation on how can I move towards that, like the highest good, is the beginning of a kind of wisdom. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm pushing myself to some sort of limit here, because yeah, it's just, to me, that is what wisdom is leading us towards, like harmony within and without. And that's why, you know, we kind of, we go within ourselves, we contemplate, you know, we find space to receive greater understanding about what it would take for us to move closer towards that highest good. And maybe, you know, the thing of that inner inquiry is that it all starts within. Like it has to. You have to become almost like a fountain of blessings because of your fortitude and your commitment to the project of developing wisdom. And so it has to start within. Because otherwise you become like the person who gives everybody armchair advice but clearly doesn't have the results in their life. And I think that um that's like the proof of wisdom, right? Is you can tell from somebody's fruits. By their fruits you will know them. And if they have those fruits, then you're more likely to listen to them. And so, yeah, it all has to start from within. And man, that's a challenge. That's a struggle because we always want everybody else to be the problem and everything else to be the problem. You
Yeah.
know, yeah.
Yeah, that I made a note as well and was contemplating that first inscription of the three that I read, the know thyself thing, which
Mm,
as you mentioned, Heraclitus talking about this inquire within. And like there's this story of say a journalist, for example, going to a monk and asking, what's wrong with the world, and the monk asks, who are you, and the person responds with their name. That's no, it's just your name. Like who are you? I'm a I'm a journalist, or fill in the blank
mhm,
with whatever. No, that's your profession. Who are you? And then you keep going like, I'm a human. That's not. I mean, you can go through that perennial question of who am I, and rattle off, three or four responses. But at the end, the monk responds, it's that's the biggest problem. We don't know who we are, which is that
mhm,
same inscription in the way of some sort of knowing ourselves. And it's such a challenging thing, but I do think there is something really important in the way of that harmony that you're talking about. It's like to be in harmony. God, it seems like we have to have some sort of clarity of who we are and how we fit in this whole thing. Um, and I'm a big fan of the Buddhist type of teaching of no self stuff, which gets complicated and all of that. But it does seem like also, as you were saying, kind of like the limits of language. When you get to a certain point, it's difficult to really put a language to things. Even
mm,
something as simple, back to the first thing we said of, say, knowing what is good. Yeah, I want to follow the cardinal virtues. Why? If you hit that question 5 times with a why, well, you really don't. It's difficult to put into words. It's maybe because I believe that that is the best way to live. I believe that this will lead me to whatever it may be. And you could say belief, faith, whatever it may be. But it seems like whatever we do, whether it's a particular wisdom tradition, whether it's a particular religious tradition, there is a certain, it is a faith thing. Like, we don't exactly know what is going to bring us to that desired port or the highest good, or fill in the blank with whatever you would want. And it seems important as well to know that I am essentially choosing. I am adopting this particular thing. So, in the weird thing of the what is wisdom, like it's in a way you have to take a step. You have to step forward and chart a particular path that is essentially I'm not going to I don't want to overstate that, where it's like requires complete faith, because
Mm.
obviously we have a body of wisdom and writings and philosophy and all that type of stuff that can help us, but we don't necessarily know what that's going to lead. Like, for example, that virtue of courage that we're embodying of the cardinal virtues could lead us to lose our life, and sacrifice our life for
Yeah.
another. Which, not that there's anything wrong with that. Maybe that's what we're called to do, but it's not something we're necessarily gonna know. So anyway, I brought in
Mm.
too many
Mm.
different too many different things there. But yeah.
No, no, I think it's yeah. I mean that faith. I'm brought to mind of another definition of wisdom that I heard when I met Charles Kim, the owner of this music school that I manage here. He said wisdom is prioritization,
Mm.
and I think that there's something to that. That if you put first things first, there's like a chain that you can follow, and I think you do have to have faith to do that, especially if you're uh, a person who recognizes God, you know, um, uh, it's almost like that space that you carve out for yourself and you go within and you listen intently. For the spiritual person, like I think like it's so easy to get so reductionist about that process. Well, a thought comes, but what is that thought? Where the hell is that coming from? Really? Like, like when you carve out space and you ask a question with full faith, like, hey, I want to know what I should do about this situation. And then all of these ideas just start coming, and maybe they're not all the best ideas, but you can sift through and if you're really aiming up, then something will come that will at least be better than what you would have done if you just kept on going with the chattering mind all day. And for the spiritual person, it's almost like God popping in and saying, "Hello, here you go." Like, uh, and and I wonder, if we place that relationship with the totality, God, the oneness of everything, to be able to pause and to kind of seep into that oneness from time to time, and to try and gather a little bit of the wisdom of the universe and your lived experience, um, and then to try and order your life so that the most important things come first. Perhaps, again, perhaps for a spiritual person, it's the relationship with God. The cultivation of a wise way. Which inevitably leads you to be a stronger, more capable, more responsible individual to be able to uh, expand your care, your circles of care, right? Like the Stoics talk about your circles of uh, caretaking of other people, and perhaps then you become a vessel for this kind of wisdom, so that others can go on that path as well. And um, I wonder how good life could be if we really if we really put first things first and prioritized well and had the faith, like you talk about, to go on that adventure. Because what that would also mean is that, it's like Jordan Peterson, he says, sit by your bed and ask yourself, what are all of the stupid things that I'm doing that I know 20 years from now, it's going to have devastating effects if I keep on doing this every day. And every single one of us can ask that question. If we're really asking it, then we immediately get 10 answers, and it just crushes it. I do. And it crushes me. It's like, oh my gosh, the level at which I do not live up to the standard of the philosophical path, really at my core, is painful. And if you really have faith, then you take that information, you say, okay, I'm going on this adventure, like, and there is almost like a trust in God sort of thing going on there. It's like, I have to trust that if I want to become everything that I know I'm capable of, then I have to heed this advice, and um, it's difficult because, like, that advice that we receive in those quiet moments is not always convenient or the thing that we want to do, and we have so much mental baggage just dragging us back into the darkness. Maybe I'm just revealing my own psychological imperfection here, but it's like, that's what I feel, like that life is a constant battle between moving toward the light, or being dragged back into the darkness. And it's like, it's not easy, and I think the knowledge of, even just the knowledge of that, the knowledge of our imperfection, it's almost like the knowledge of good and evil. It's just like immediately crushing, right? When you realize that I'm so asleep so much of the time, even though I know as an armchair expert, it's like, I want to be in the light more and more often. Um, and so, yeah, I think it's so easy just to be pulled into that darkness, and to not trust that if we did those things, life would be so much better, you know.
Yeah. I'm s- I'm struck as you're talking, just how interconnected these questions can be.
Yeah.
Like these, half a dozen questions that we came up with, how to live last week. What is wisdom, and the next episode, what is love? Because I've done a number of episodes. Like, as you know, I typically ask people this question, like, what is wisdom? And like so many guests, it's tough to talk about wisdom without talking about love, like for yourself, for others. Um, and I mean, essentially, like the Seneca, at being a better friend of myself, you could maybe say love there,
Mm.
as well. But I saw I saw a meme somewhere. It stuck with me. Within the last few years, it says philosophy is called the love of wisdom. And it says Christianity is the wisdom of love. And I do think that's good, of thinking like the wisdom of love as well. Whether you call that
Mm.
Christianity or not, people could call it whatever. But um, there's I can't remember who said it, um, but maybe it was Saint Teresa of Avila, but she kind of railed against dumb love. People that are just like all loving, but there's some sort of a lack of wisdom, that comes along with it.
Mm.
Uh, and it's difficult for us to put an and between things. At least it is, for me. But I think it connects with what Marcus Aurelius, like probably my favorite quote or clearest quote. The fruit of this life is a good character and acts for the common good. Man,
Mm,
that and right there is really holding a bunch. You know,
mm,
I think sometimes we can think of people like, say, Mother Teresa might be an example, and you think of it as just this all love, like what an amazing thing, which absolutely, an amazing life of service and love to people in need. But there's a tremendous amount of wisdom that went along with that to essentially build this organization, this religious order. And there was many people that we don't know. It's not like Mother Teresa was doing this like John Rambo. There was a whole religious order. There was many people that we don't know their names, but were doing the very exact thing that Mother Teresa was doing. You know, there was
mm,
many Mother Teresas that were, um, essentially cultivating their character and doing acts for the common good. If you watch a documentary or something about their life, um, you know, waking up early, spending 2 hours in the morning in silent prayer, and then there was a very structured, disciplined routine that was
mm,
required to carry out that mission that lives on today. I
mm,
don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about, like wisdom and love, like two wings of a bird, and kind of both being needed.
mm, mm. Yeah, I think you're right. Um, and I think it's really important that you brought that up because even just thinking personally about the way that I've been discussing these things today, I know that even within myself, so much of that battle is like it's framed in this kind of adversarial, like I'm struggling uphill and, look at all the ways that I'm imperfect, all this sort of stuff, which is that's fine, but it needs to be balanced out with the almost that alignment of love, love God, love your neighbor, love yourself, just yeah. I wonder, what that looks and feels like to be so perfectly aligned with wisdom and love,
Yeah.
um, on all these different levels. Yeah, and totally. I mean, like you look at the flame that was lit by Christ. This. For all intents and purposes, like Western culture's sage, um, and just the ripple effects that led throughout thousands of years, and there's darkness that came from the sins of mankind, but there's also so much light that came, and so much love, like you say, all of these people who are trying to cultivate their characters and do acts for the common good. uh yeah, man, it's like at least the experiment is what does, like, yeah, what does wisdom look like at a societal level, community level? What does love look like yeah, I remember driving just last Sunday. I'm driving past a church and somebody's standing out there with a sign, "We're glad to see you." Like, and you know, hey, that's nice. That's nice. Like, that's just, it's nice and it's good to see. And yeah, I'm all, this is somewhat irrelevant probably, but I'm always very impressed with the kind of evangelists who are just happy standing in the middle of the road, with their big signs, hey, Christ loves you. It's like, look at all these people driving past and, like you're just standing there with a sign, and maybe some people get it. Hey, that's nice. That's a nice message. Maybe some people think you're a bit of a kook, a loony. But the courage to just do that, I think is phenomenal. And I often wonder, like, where do they get that kind of courage to, like, just get out there with a sign and stand there and just give people a positive message for their day.
Yeah.
I think yeah.
It's it's so strange. Like in my mind, sometimes I want to think big, and I think this is not true for everybody, but for a lot of us, when it comes to that acts for the common good, we want to think of something big and grand. It's really challenging, and Mother Teresa would say, just simply smile. Like that's that's
Mm,
a, that's a real gift. And when I drop off my kids every morning last year, we're obviously summer break now when we're recording this, but last year, there was someone out front greeting the kids, same person every morning, smiling, waving,
mm,
as everybody gets dropped off. And it's like, God, what a beautiful gift. And I don't necessarily want to make more of it than it is, but I don't want to diminish it either. It is a beautiful thing of to be able to smile and wave and welcome someone. In my town here, there's this little young guy, probably high school or something like that, but he's on the street corner at times, just dancing, and he's
mm,
dancing like full of love and joy, smiling, like waving at kids in the car. It's at a stoplight, so sometimes you're stopped and stuff like that, and just like this unbelievable dancer, really really into it. um and it's wow, like that's a real gift in a way. And like obviously I think that connects with style that we were, Bukowski was talking about, but it also connects with wisdom to me. Like, wow, that's awesome. Sometimes I think about the level of self-awareness that is probably, required to go do that, to show up
mm,
in a way of your authentic self for no sort of, there, it's not like a job. This person isn't getting paid a single dime to go do this. I'm going to go spread a bit of joy. um
mm,
it's I don't know. I think there are some of these small things, and Mother Teresa said, just feed one person. Obviously, it's lovely if you can feed a million or something like that, but it's also lovely if you can just feed one person. Um,
yeah,
yeah, but it's just
yeah.
it seems important to remember some of the small, things and the ripple effect that they can also have.
Mm. I just love that story though, the kid who dances. Yeah, I think we can all think of a time where we've seen somebody like that. And maybe your first response is like, that's strange. But should that be strange? Should that be weird? That you find somebody like on the side of the street dancing and having a great time. It's like going back to that picture of Disneyland. You want to see people doing that, you want people.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking back to a conversation I recently had with Anthony Arizmendi. It's not on the podcast, but we were talking about kind of business and life and money, things like that. And he just said to me, Simon, like money, it's just like it's energy from the sun. Think about it like your heart, right? Now, the blood flows in and flows out. Like now, if the heart just kept that blood there, you're going to die, right? There needs to be like a passing through, a giving, as
Mm,
well, a sharing, uh, and 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 you just think about, like brilliant artists or uh, altruistic business people, or great philosophers or great dancers, like you saw there. There's a kind of like let your light so shine, just let that light shine, like the goodness that is within you, within your heart, heart, the place of love, you know let that love just completely shine through as fully as it can. And to the extent that you do that, you'll receive what you need. That's almost like the promise, right? It's like if you will just fully let go of the things that are keeping you in the darkness, and share that light, share that goodness, that love with everybody around you, whether it is giving somebody a meal or having a smile, or dancing on the street, with no expectation necessarily of return, but just to let that light get out of you. you know I have a feeling that the promise there is like, to those who have, more will be given. To those who have not, more will be taken away. It's like, to the extent that you give of that love and that light, more joy will come to you. And there's a kind of, symbiotic relationship with the universe and yourself there, of giving and receiving. Yeah, no, this has been a very productive conversation. I've really enjoyed this because like, we've gone on many winding roads, but there's, like you say, there's so much interconnectedness, and we are living with the questions here. And I just love how our conversations, Josh, like, um, it just turns on the mind, gets you thinking in different ways about these things. But man, I'm really grateful for these sorts of things to chew on.
Likewise. And it's the questions themselves. Like, it is an interesting thing. A previous guest I had on, Eric Weiner, who wrote Socrates Express, great book. He's just like, a good question will grab a hold of you and won't let
Mm.
go. And it's like, some of these, in a
Yeah.
way, in different seasons of life, it all depends on what maybe grabs a hold of you. But a particular question, and I thought it might be helpful as we wrap up the conversation to talk a little bit about maybe practices, like the
Mm.
search for wisdom. You've mentioned contemplation a few times throughout the conversation, but in Buddhism, they're often, I think, referred to as the three wisdom tools. One is listening, um, contemplating is another, and then meditation. So oftentimes you think of maybe Buddhism, and it's just mindfulness or just meditation, but also that thing of the listening, like listening to a Dharma talk or listening to a podcast like this one,
Mm.
that in some way can help you to maybe, like, reorient how you're looking or thinking about something, and help you to see something in a new way. I know many of your conversations, I was just before we hit record, telling you how much I look up to you as a podcaster, and how I think you're a real expert in terms of facilitating a discussion about wisdom and things like that we've been talking about. But even a podcast can essentially, like, give birth to a bit of contemplation. It's like you hear
Yeah.
something, and then 3 days later, it's still lingering in the background, in the way, you're still living with the question or the idea.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
I think the trap we fall into is, I know I fall into this, is thinking that the practice is listening to the podcast, when the podcast might be, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? The podcast might be the spark that lights a flame within you, and then you've got to kindle that flame. That's why, for all of the benefits of the culture that we live in, where you can search anything and get great results, great stimulus, podcast, YouTube video, article, whatever it is, anything you want, you can get it. But also, like, maybe from time to time we need to like put the headphones down, you know, and say,
Yeah.
hang on, I've listened to what, like 100 podcasts in the last 2 days. Like, what have I learned? Like, how is this, what am I going to take from that and actually implement in my life, you know? And I think, yeah, in many ways we live in a kind of like, you know, we live in this culture where you know, like content is just like this feed to cattle. You know, it's like, and we're the cattle coming up to the trough of our iPhone. You know, we're, yeah, keep on giving me that stuff. You know, but in the end, even wise conversations and great podcasts and great videos can become a distraction. You know, look at how wise I am because I listen to these podcasts. Well, you know, how much have you implemented? Like, what do you remember? Like, what are you actually doing about it? And so maybe that's one of the reasons why I don't mind taking a like a 3 month break from the podcast. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, chill out, everybody. I'll be back when I'll be back when the time is right. Right? You know, we can yeah, but yeah, man, it's I think you're right. It's like what Jim Rohn say. You know, Jim Rohn, he talked about how um, maybe all you need is like one idea to unlock that door to greater wisdom in your life. You know, maybe you've got like three of the combinations, but you just need that fourth one. And the power of like one, two, three words to just completely send you on a different direction of your life is just immense and beautiful. And so yeah, man, let's keep on trying to do that, you know, and I know you do that with your podcasts, you know. But I think that's our role, is just to give people not only that information that can perhaps be that final lock combination for them to unlock a completely new direction in their lives, but just to encourage people, like, yeah, develop a practice where you actually take these lessons and contemplate them further and try to really implement them. And otherwise, what's the purpose? It's, you know, just listening to stuff.
Yeah.
Listening to
I
a whole
think
bunch of speak. You know, go on.
I was just going to say, so well said. I think that is such an important point. Let me ask one follow-up question to that,
Go.
if I could. You know how you get going down a particular path, and you've, like myself, explored different things and different wisdom traditions, and it seems like it is important to get going down a particular idea, or maybe in the way of this, a particular question. Follow it a bit. You know, how do you have the patience to follow it a bit before, jumping off to another question, in a way? Because in a way, we've talked about, yeah, these questions are interconnected in a way, but then in another way, they're not. And maybe it's important to stay with the what is wisdom question for a while, till you have a bit of an answer before, jumping and exploring something else. And I think you could say the same thing of a particular wisdom tradition. If it's Stoicism, if it's Christianity,
Mm.
how do you ensure that you explore that enough to really have some understanding there before you jump on to something new? The patience to
Mm.
stay with, to follow your curiosity, that initially
Mm.
got some sort of search started.
Yeah, I think that like the curiosity that you talk about is maybe the key word for me. Like we when you're so gripped by something that to pursue that thing is not difficult. You know, it's
Mm,
and I think I guess I lean more in the direction of uh, uh, following what my interests are.
mm,
And when you come across a particular interest that's pulling you in a direction, then there's a nice flow to it where you're pursuing something that you inherently are going to find value in. And along the way, the contemplation comes. I'm thinking more in terms of, well, maybe this is, now that I'm thinking about it, this path of pursuing a wise life, I think it's always best walked when the contemplation comes alongside like acts in the world, whether
mm,
it's developing some sort of discipline, pursuing some sort of venture, um, building a relationship with somebody. Because when we're contemplating wisdom, we're always going to be contemplating how we can better pursue the things that we're pursuing in our lives, or whether we need to change those aims, or how do we develop relationships with other people in a wise way. Like, it's always got to be linked to some sort of external thing, that we're doing, and it's in that kind of, maybe that's the whole like knowledge of things human and divine coming into it. We're trying to insert a little bit more of the divine into the human reality that we live in. And I'm just thinking about, the reason I came to that just now is because some of the more profound changes I've seen in my own personal satisfaction in life, and also in my understanding of who I am and how I can be of better service to people, have come from really pursuing uh, artistic projects, or things like the walled garden, or things like working here in Tustin Music Center. And you know because these things all require us to constantly wrestle with how could this be better, you know and I'm thinking particularly of when I started learning piano again, and just the joy and the peace that I found from pursuing that discipline, but from pursuing it in a way that required me to be a philosopher first and a musician second. You know,
mm,
Not only I'm going to sit there at the piano, but I need to think about how I'm going to learn and why I'm learning this, and then comes the part of well, sharing this with others. Um and so, yeah, I don't I generally, honestly, I don't find myself to be an extremely disciplined person. I think my particular skill is identifying the areas of interest that I have that would be aligned with, you know that would be probably good for me and for others, and trying to pursue that in a way where the inevitable consequence is that I learn more about what it is that would be better, and trying to refine what it means to live a wise life personally. And I think everybody should be pursuing wisdom in the context of relationships, or disciplines, or projects, or doing work in the world, because it's just going to make everything better. So yeah, I think it is a struggle, to really pull away and like push yourself in a particular direction of inquiry, but I also think it's so much easier if it's something that you can recognize is perfectly aligned with your nature, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I've given a clear answer at all to your question, but I'm going to leave it at
No, I
that.
love it. It's good, and that's a great way to wrap it up. And I have to key in on one word that you said was this wrestle, and maybe that's
Mm,
another way to think about this series, wrestling with the questions,
mm,
which is a bit of
yeah,
what we're doing as well. We're wrestling and living with them. So good stuff. I'm so
mm,
grateful for you taking the time and connecting. I've really enjoyed these conversations thus far, and look forward to many more.
yeah. Thanks, Josh. It's always a pleasure, man.